Hi, welcome back to the Medicinal Food Forest in Hot Springs, Montana. I'm Michael Pilarski, and I just wanted to show you the stage of this year's development. As you saw in earlier videos, this was just bare grass or grassy pasture, like all that dry stuff out there. We tilled it this spring, added some soil amendments, planted it into a medicinal food forest. And here we are on August 29th in the height of its summer exuberance. So we wanted to show you what it looks like. It worked! Amazing! It didn't look very good in those early days when it was just that dusty patch of ground. So this medicinal food forest is divided into 4 sections. So we'll just look at each of the sections in turn. Come on down here. So here we are, this is 1/4 of the garden here, and it's easy to see that there's a lot of green stuff out there, and you can see rows of things. So I'll just explain it kind of starting from the top. Along this edge here is a row of trees and berries. Raspberry, raspberry, raspberry. I see a mulberry down there, a bunch of oak trees. So this is a row of trees and berries. And then there's a row of potatoes. And then there's another row of trees and raspberries. See, there's raspberries, raspberries, there's blackberries, there's some black locust. So there's and most of the trees and shrubs are just, a lot of them aren't even visible above the potato canopy because the potatoes are planted right here. Here's one of the hills. And it's flopped over onto the tree rows. Next year, the potatoes will be gone. The tree rows will grow big and robust, and I'll put a narrow crop of annual crop in between here where the potatoes are, but it's got to be narrow. It can't be wide like the potatoes this year. This year, the potatoes had room. So I'm going to get a good crop of potatoes out of here. We'll dig one up in a bit. Next, this is mainly an herb and tree area, medicinal food forest. Here is some figwort that's been harvested just 2 days ago. Here is Elecampane, a 2-year root crop, a medicinal root. Here is a row of marshmallow. It's already been harvested twice for leaf. I'll get one more harvest out of it. And I usually harvest the root in year 2. Then I have a row of beets. And we have here cylindrical beets. So a lot of them, they'll grow out of the ground. They'll be about, probably 5 times as big by the end of the season. They're just really taking off at this point. So we've got a lot of cylindrical beets. Here's a row of black cohosh, a long-term 4-year medicinal root crop. They never have looked that good this year, but they keep coming back. Shows me the root's alive. Next year it should really take off. So this year is sort of like the creeping year. Here's a row we looked at this at another time, but here's a row of oat straw for milky oats. This was just harvested a week ago, and I'll get a second regrowth, minor regrowth out of it. I got a little mulch out of some of the tops, and see, I have 2 rows here, and there's 2 more rows in the next section. So between the 2 of them, I got 25 pounds of milky oats. So that's worth $300 to me. And then I've got 30 pounds of dried oat straw, which is worth about $300. So I made about $600 on these 2 rows, this little bit of rows of oats here as a catch crop, just to have a little bit of space this year. And so I was able to squeeze that crop in and made good money on it. In back of them were more rows of beets. The beets were really kind of stunted by the oats. They didn't get much sunlight, but now I've harvested the oats and the beets are what we call released. The beets will now be released. They're going to get the sun, and I'll thin them some more, and I'll get a beet crop out of this as well. See, there's 2 rows of beets. In between the beets is this multi-dimensional system here of apple. This is a currant. an apple tree. There's probably, there's another currant here. And then here's another currant here. And here's another apple tree. Another apple tree. Here's another, here's a gooseberry that didn't make it. We have some losses. Here's a gooseberry that did make it. So in between the trees are herbs. Here we have the goldenrod. Here we have feverfew, which has already been harvested once. Here's oregano, which needs to be harvested. Here is a rosemary. Here's catnip, which was just harvested. I just shipped 8 pounds of catnip. The other, or 6 pounds, so it was $36 worth of catnip, just for, a few little patches of catnip. Here's the anisassip for the bees and for medicine. So anyway, so here's a row of trees, shrubs, and herbs, and beets, and oats, and they're all working. I'm pleased to say. I was wondering if it would work. Here's Joe Pye weed. I see a lot of bees working it. Again, this place has more bee forage than anything else in the neighborhood. You can see it's dry and brown out there, and so I've created a little island for the bees. And here's bone set, Eupatorium perfoliatum. Here's a little bit of Baikal skullcap. That's a long-term 4-year root. Bee balm, or Monarda didyma, which is again medicinal plant. Finally, here's a row of not finally, but next is this row of Jerusalem artichokes, which are doing very healthily, and I can count on getting a good crop out of them. And finally, the last row here is squash, winter squash. And here's a melon, actually. So the winter's, the deer really hurt my first planting of winter squash. There's one there, there's another one. There's a big green one. Anyway, there's winter squash in here. And the deer, by their early depredations, definitely didn't help things on that front. But anyway, it worked. Okay, so there's section number 1. Section number 2 is fairly similar. What's different about it? Well, instead of the Jerusalem artichokes, I've got a row of potatoes here with here's our row of by the way, here's our row of trees and shrubs that go back and forth. See, there's 5 rows of trees and shrubs that go this way. See, that's a choke cherry. Here's a philodendron. That one's barely alive. There's another choke cherry. Here's a linden tree, which is a medicinal tree. What I did in this potato row, here's an oak tree. So every now and then in this potato row, there's a row of trees in here, at relatively wide spacing. I haven't even looked at them lately to see how many made it. Here's another oak tree. It's alive. It's not doing particularly great, but as long as it stays alive the first year, next year it can really go. It can go for it. And so I'm going to get a good crop of potatoes here. Well, I got the trees established. The squash that were on this other row have been, of course, running around. So here, for instance, is winter squash. So besides getting potatoes out of this bit of sunshine, I'm getting squash as well. They sort of intermingle. They can both coexist, both produce a decent, a good crop. The crop of both of them combined is better than if I kept them out of there. In other words, I may lose a little bit of potato production, but I'm going to more than offset it with the squash production. Plus, I got the trees in here coming on for the long haul. For instance, here's a black locust. It really got its head above the crowd here. But there's a bunch of trees in there. And look at the size of the squash leaves this year. I'm really impressed I have a lot of squash in here with giant leaves. And so here's a crop of holy basil I just harvested the other day. Here's some columbine. Here's Olympic mullein for the mullein flowers, the medicinal mullein flowers. And then back to our system of the there's lemon balm, meadow sweet. Here's our system of the oats, beets, trees, shrubs, apples, herbs, oregano, hyssop, oregano, a lot of oregano in here I see. and then another row of the oats. Here's the black cohosh row again. Here's a black locust coming up with one of them somehow or another. I like it when trees start volunteering on the site. You know, there's our cylindrical beech coming along nicely. Holy basil, I just harvest. I'll talk more about that, but there's holy basil, lemon balm, catnip, motherwort, lovage, celandine, hyssop, marshmallow. So you see, this is betony. So you can see this is a big herb area, but I got a lot of vegetables in here this year. Next year, the herbs will be more dominant. And then finally up there, there's the trees, potatoes, trees again. So that's section number 2. This is section number 3, and this area I designated as part of its role was home garden for the people that are staying here at this household. So, you know, here is, for instance, I got a lot of big tomatoes coming on that I have to pick here. But anyway, I've got a lot of these, probably Black Prince or Black Crim, one of those kinds. But anyway, you can see I have a lot of tomatoes in here. And this is a mustard that's going to seed, so I'm going to get a seed crop. There's already ripening and falling, so I probably got, you harvest this at the optimum time when you can, you know, some are going to be fallen while others are still ripening, and so you have to try to hit it. I'd like to do I'll do one-shot harvest here, is when the maximum amount are ripe or almost ripe, and that's probably only a couple days away. I'll get a really bunch of seed out of this. This is one of the crops, is the seed crop. So every year I count on the seed crop as part of the income, part of the production. Here's kales, and so far so good. No aphid yet this season on these. And here's some celery leaf for salad. Lettuce going to seed. I'll get some lettuce seed. There's a lot of basil in here. The basil is getting overwhelmed by the sun-glow tomatoes here a bit, but what the heck. I didn't have time to trellis the tomatoes. That was one of my faults this year. Mea culpa, mea culpa, mea culpa, as we used to say back in Catholic camp. A little bit of greens. But look, here's a row of the oats. This went in later than my oats already harvested. These are about ready for harvest. You harvest them when there's a lot of milk. See, there's a bunch of white milk comes out. If I squeeze it, white milk comes out. So you want to get it when white milk. Maybe these ones down here don't have so much milk down here yet. So I'm waiting for the perfect day. Again, probably 2 or 3 days from now, I'm going to strip the oats. I'll cut off the straw, and then whatever is living here has more light. And I'll get my catch crop here. See, I got some corn here. You can see back there, there's a lot of there's our squash row again with winter squash growing in there. More seed crop. There's a arugula seed and mustard seed. Here's little carrots. Here's some what do we got here? Some nice eggplant. So yeah, I like these. Just they're pretty as well as food. We got eggplants. See, here's our basil out here in the open. Just cropped that the other day. I've got 3 cuttings or more. Here's peppers. Here's Hungarian wax. Here's some green peppers. Here's some jalapeno peppers. And so what I'll do later in the season, when I have my tomato production peaking late in the season, I'll take a lot of the tomatoes and I'll take all the peppers and I'll make a big batch of salsa. So these are, you know, I eat a little bit as I go, but mainly this is for storage, waiting for the salsa. There's some, anyway, see, the tomatoes are really covering a lot of territory here, but they're producing, so it's all right. Here's one pumpkin plant. I'm impressed with this pumpkin plant. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 good-sized pumpkins, and they're already bright orange. These are going to be very ripe. Oh, look, here's a mushroom. Ha ha. I love it when I start getting mushrooms in the system. It shows that there's fungi moving in, and they're really good for the soil. So I haven't seen many of those yet, but they're starting. And then, of course, no garden is complete without zucchini. So we have zucchini, of course. More basil. Oh yeah, and here's a patch of beets. Here's more of an idea of the form of the cylindrical beet. See, it makes this big cylinder, and there's a lot of beet greens on there too. So I have enough beet greens to feed the town for a meal, I think. Okay, so there's just to finish this section off, the food section. Doesn't, you know, here's a whole lot of rhubarb. I got 2 sections with a rhubarb row. This will be, you know, I'm going to get a lot of rhubarb production for a lot of years out of this. So this is a perennial food crop. Here's onions in here. This is called horse onions, a type of bulbing onion, kind of like a shallot. There's some tarragon. There's some French sorrel. I see some skullcap up there, garlic, chives, some more onions. Here's a row of different kind of potatoes. These are Ozette potatoes from a fantastic story. We should do a special section on it later. And then here's a row of brassicas. There's broccoli going to seed, and look at all the bees that are on it. So that's feeding the bees, and I'm going to get a seed crop of broccoli out of it. I've got a lot of Brussels sprouts in there, and kohlrabis and cabbages. You know, more food crop. Okay, so finally, the fourth section of 4. Once again, there's a row of trees and shrubs across the wind here. Here's a linden tree, an autumn olive, nitrogen fixing, Nanking cherry, aronia berry, Nanking cherry, aronia berry. And look at this, I got 1, 2, 3 nice ginkgos in here. These are ginkgo trees, and I've got 2 of these Cornelian cherry dogwood. Yum. Cornelian cherry dogwood. And in between the trees, I almost always plant bush beans. See, here's bush beans. I've already harvested most of these, but look at this one here. This is a good example of the bush beans are growing in between the trees for the first year. They're fixing nitrogen, helping the tree grow up tall by providing a little side shade. And I get all these beans. Alright, so we got a lot of beans in here. Alright, so then you can see the squash is sort of escaping its bounds a little bit this way, but it took up the path, but I didn't need the path that much. So, you know, I got some squash out of the deal. So this section is mainly an herb section once again. So here's holy basil. This was just harvested 3 days ago. All this holy basil here in between. See, this is a row of trees and shrubs again. Here's Nanking cherry, Nanking cherry, Nanking cherry, choke cherry, service berry, rugosa rose, service berry, and so forth. A row of, this is all a shrub berry row for the overstory, or the middle story eventually. But this year I just harvested 50 pounds of holy basil in my holy basil patch here, which is I'm pretty happy about, because that's worth that was worth almost $500 to me. So the garden's starting to pay its way back. So one of the permaculture principles is obtain a yield. And so in obtaining a yield here, I want to get, as I pointed out in every session of this, I want good production the first year. I'm putting a food forest in, but I don't want to wait for years for the food forest to bear. I want good production. And I've achieved that really well this year. So this holy basil is an annual herb. But if I've already had 2 other cuttings before that. I've got 1 more cutting. So this may end up being worth $900 or something, perhaps, and just that crop. And I'll probably have $700 out the oats. And I'm starting, some of the other herbs are starting to harvest too. I got money for the perfoliatum, catnip, blah, blah, blah. So I'm just starting. It's really, in the last couple of weeks, I'm really starting to harvest medicinal herbs from this first year. But the big crop, of course, this year is going to be the vegetables, the potatoes, the beets. See, here's another row of beets are way out here. See, again, I was just filling in this row. Here's another row of cylindrical beets in between the bone set, the stevia, the valerian, the anishyssop, bugleweed, etc. So, got to have good money from the vegetables as well as the herbs. I've already got 2 cuttings off this Eupatorium perfoliatum, and I'm sure I'll get another cutting. It's growing quite nicely, so I'll get a 3rd cutting. Here's bugleweed, Lycopus. This is for hyperthyroid, people use it for, traditional use. It's a mint family plant, and this I'll be getting another good cutting here, a little bit later on. Of course, we've already mentioned the fact that we have the potato row and the squash row. This is the area that the deer hurt the least. So I have a really nice squashes coming on here. Look at this one here. This is cute. You'll never find this variety in a store because I created this variety. I've been letting my squash breed, and I've been selecting for this particular form. It's sort of a Turk's turban kind of look, but I'm going for colorful. Good size. This isn't as big as I like them, but it's still, this will be worth saving the seed from for next year because very nice coloration. So I'm after something that looks good and is tasty to boot and productive. So I've got a number of those guys in here coming on. But yeah, there's all sizes and colors of squash. So take a look at this one. See, this is more of a cross between probably a buttercup and one of the orange squashes. Here's one that's got a nice Turk's turban form, but is green, not so colorful. So, and it's not that big, so I won't tend to save seed from that one. Anyway, you can play around and get new things. It's fun to experiment. Here's a goji berry. Yeah, and they're just starting to flower. The cute little purple flowers, Solanaceae family. This won't fruit this year, but the fact that it's flowering in its first season after transplanting, I'm expecting I'll get fruit next year. Here's autumn olive, nitrogen fixing, fruiting. Here's a linden tree. Here's more of our beans. In between here's another linden tree, a bean. Here's a goji berry. Here's sea buckthorn, or Hippophaeron noedes. Caragana, and then here's some Caraganas. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Caraganas, and here nitrogen fixing shrubs. And we're almost there. Here's an example of me leaving this particular type of weed in the system because I just cut it back over here because it was sprawling onto the beets. But here I have an area that didn't, this apple tree made it, this Nanking cherry made it, but this gooseberry and this gooseberry didn't, or that one. So I have sort of a gap here, and I don't like gaps in the garden. So I'm letting this weed grow here to, just pump the system a little bit. Here's another one here. I just cut it back away from my plant. This is the barest ground you'll see in the whole garden, partly because I just harvested all the holy basil and a bunch of things, and partly because some of the herbs didn't grow that big this year, like these blackroot or Veronicastrum. They didn't do that well this year, but next year I'm expecting they'll really take off and bush way out. And there's a bit of annual crop in the system here again. Here's onion, which I may not get great bottoms on, it looks like. Some of them are bulbing now. Yeah, looks like I'll get some bulb, but I'll probably harvest a lot of it for the Inland Northwest Permaculture Convergence, and just, the tops can substitute for buying in bulk onions if we need it. Here's the rhubarb once again, the row of potatoes, and then up there's another row of trees and shrubs intermixed with, in this case, there's tomatoes, there's summer savory, all kinds of stuff on the upper row interspersed. Yeah. Oh, here's one of the weeds I let go. This is a wild lettuce here, and so I let it grow because again it's a bare spot, but it's a crop for me. I sell this, so I'll take this and put it in the dryer, and that weed will probably be worth, it's probably I don't know, $1 worth of product or something. Echinacea flowering. Need to get more echinacea. This is just my first year, so I'm just getting started. Get some time. And here's a piece of grass, and so I'll just use it to illustrate a point. Some time back, about a month ago or so, I noticed that my weeding was so well caught up on that I declared this a grass-free zone garden. In other words, if I see a grass, I stop and I get it out. Hopefully, usually I would have my hori-hori and get it out with the roots. Here's another one here. So you can see I'm a little behind, but if you look around this garden, you'll see very, very, very few, not that many weeds, period, but you'll find very little grass. My goal is a grass-free zone. I consider grass one of my worst weeds, so to speak. Here's a weed I like, by the way. Here's stepping on this. This is sheep sorrel, or Rumex acetosella. It's in the Essiac anti-cancer formula, and it's related to yellow dock. It's incredibly yummy leaves, and I get orders for it. It makes a nice creeping ground cover, so I've been letting that grow in the garden in various places to establish a partial ground cover of sheep sorrel. So it's a ground cover plus a medicine that I can harvest. So there's a weed I'm encouraging. Oh, here's some holy basil I forgot. Look at this. Oh, I could have harvested another pound here. But this is, see how beautiful flowers, very powerful medicinal plant from India. So I'm selling, I just harvested a bunch of that. Here's another grass trying to grow. We'll get it though. Here's you can see the yellow jackets working this. Interesting. This is Daga plant from South Africa. It's a medicinal plant, motherwort family. But I grow it just because I think it's gorgeous. Here, see, it's growing in between. Here's a gooseberry plant. Here's another gooseberry plant, another gooseberry. So this is a row of trees and shrubs up here. Here's a couple of weeds that escaped. That's a Anacisip. Here's clary sage. That'll be a seed crop. Here's a lovage and a currant. Here's black currant. Here's a black currant. There's even a few berries on it left drying on it. Here's some nasturtium, more black currant. And then there's more berries in here. See, here's a black currant sticking out. Here's a black currant. They're kind of weighed down by the tomatoes. The tomatoes and the potatoes have intermingled here and just created a jungle. But I'm just starting to get, these tomatoes went in late, just starting to get production on them, but we'll get something. Again, but this is closed canopy garden, folks. You don't see any soil. It's all sunlight being captured by plants and turned into medicines and food. That's the goal. Capturing as much sunlight as possible. And in my first year garden, as you can see, I'm very much of a meticulous weeder. In future years, we'll show you how this develops, and over the years to come, there'll be more weeds in the system as the robust perennials just capture the ground and there's no holding them back. In the meantime, I need to weed and care for all these little babies and these little trees so that they get a good start in life, so that they can produce for me for years and years and years to come. So we're planning for the future when we put this kind of garden in. We have many waves of succession here, all the way up to a climax forest species, and we're going to have good production and yield at every year, at every step of the way. The yields will change over time, but as you can see in this first year, I'm getting herbs, I'm getting seeds, and I'm getting a lot of vegetables. Next year, I'm going to start getting berry crop, as well as all the above. So it will change, but the goal is put it all in that first year. That's one way, not the only way, but one way of doing a medicinal food forest.